Sure. Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Crytopsy, and you're listening to Heavy Mag.
Beautiful, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Kris, how you doing? So stoked to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, mate. So, Cryptopsy will release your new album As Gommorah Burns on September 8th, mate. So, it's been a while between albums. How you feeling?
It's stoked. It's great to be back to creating full-length records. Throughout the past 11 years, we did drop two EPs, and then we toured like a lot before the pandemic. So we were extremely busy. A lot of people think not much has happened since the self-titled, but we have been extremely busy up until 2019. We toured like a lot, and then we stopped in 2019 to write a new record, and then the pandemic just added a little bit more time.
So, what's actually changed with the band in those 11 years, mate?
Actually, nothing has changed because we are the same lineup. 2012, John was in the band, so he left the band. And then since that moment, we're the same four dudes that have been touring the world together. We released the Book of Suffering, Tome I, Tome II together. Those were independent. And then we signed to Nuclear Blast, which is where As Gommorah is coming out. So those would be the biggest changes that were the longest running Cryptopsy lineup, and that we signed to Nuclear Blast, and we're releasing a full-length record coming up on September 8th. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
So tell us a bit more about As Gommorah Burns from a musical point of view and what you were going for with it.
We definitely wanted to groove more. As Gommorah Burns is something that we worked a lot on for many years. But leading into even playing a note or laying down a concept or a word, we had discussed about having sections repeat longer, because Cryptopsy is a very chaotic band. It has been for many years. If you go back to the first era, as I like to call it, Lord Worm, Blasphemy Made Flesh, None So Vile, there was areas in the music that were a tad more repetitive, and groove laden while being hyper melodic. So we definitely wanted to include some of that while melding into the chaoticness of the second era of Cryptopsy, the Mike DeSalvo era, the Whisper Supremacy, the And Then You'll Beg. So we wanted to find our own voice while honoring the legacy of those two eras and craft something that was dark and groovy, which while being super chaotic, while still feeling like a cohesive song. So that sounds extremely challenging, and it was, but they found a way to do it, and that's because Christian Donaldson, our guitarist and producer, is basically a musical genius, and he worked very hard to make it happen. So he's As Gommorah Burns is by far, this new era of Cryptopsy, as I've been calling it, the most groovy, dark, yet melodic, chaotic music that we've released in a long time.
And you've released the singles Flayed the Swine and In Abeyance so far. Would you say they're a good sonic representation of what to expect from the whole album?
I believe that they are. I believe that there's maybe lacking a little bit of the darkness that's still hiding on some of the other tracks. Specifically, the album closer, Praise the Filth. It ends on such a dark malaise, something that just makes you feel horrible, something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And that's really what we were going for. We weren't necessarily going for what a lot of these death metal bands are doing these days, blending in the black metal with the death metal. That's not something that represents Cryptopsy. We wanted to find something that makes you feel bad, that makes you feel like you wake up the next morning after a hangover. That's what we wanted to bring to the groove and melody. For sure.
You've been quoted as saying that as we were writing, we kept asking ourselves if the music was too dark and too ominous. So, can you elaborate on that for us?
We were worried that it was too far outside of the umbrella of what Cryptopsy is.
Right.
Because when I look at Cryptopsy with its multiple eras, it sort of like paints like an umbrella of where Cryptopsy songs can fall. We can argue that The Unspoken King was outside of that umbrella, and I would agree with you. We don't want to make mistakes like that again. So there were certain moments, specifically the ending, Praise the Filth. It's so just gut-wrenching. We were worried it was just a bit too much, but I feel like It's an interesting approach to Cryptopsy's music to include something that's just so gut-wrenching. So I mean, I'm excited to see the fans' reaction to that track once the album is live, because it's not going to be a single. I personally and the band think it's one of the best songs on the record, so I'm excited to hear what other people think about it.
And there's also a cool conceptual thread on the album of the biblical stories of Sodom and Gomorrah against the modern day internet, mate. Oh, that sounds quite intriguing. Where did that come from?
It comes from me having a podcast. I have a podcast called Vox and Hops, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians, talk about their lives and music while drinking killer craft beers. Since I launched the podcast, I found myself being just horribly addicted to social media. The doom scroll, the dopamine drip of notifications. So I want to be a better human. I want to be a better version of myself. So I'm working on that. But as you're like working on something, it sticks in your mind. At the same time, Mike DeSalvo had told me that Cryptopsy's original name was Gommorah. And I was like, I love this. How can I include this? By the time the album, we were approaching the 30th anniversary of the band. How can I honor the legacy of the band by including this in the title? And then Sodom and Gomorrah. I was doing some research of the utopia of wealth and knowledge and power. Oh, the internet. It just seems to be a parallel that makes perfect sense to me. The internet is a beautiful place. It's amazing. We're having a conversation right now, thanks to the internet. Being such a utopia of wealth and power and knowledge and abundance. It's amazing. It's never ending, the internet. But because of that, there are people and things that have happened that are extremely negative, such as online bullying, people being stalked, people being defamed, fake news, misinformation is a better word, people being catfished. It's just there's like a rabbit hole of like the dark web of just horribleness out there. So I chose this topic and I just explored upon it, and I dug through the internet, which is funny, to find horrible things that happened in these thematics. And I chose 8 of them, 8 themes, online preachers being another one. And then just had fun and explored them, found true life horrible stories that happened for about 6 out of 8 of the stories. And then I just creative writing, challenged myself to take these topics and turn them into something. So I pushed myself, I put myself into a particular character in the story's mindset, and then basically just free flow wrote lyrics as if I was writing on a blog to keep falling into the internet part of it. So some of the lyrics are extremely simple and brutal and very vulgar, which is very far from the poetic nature of Cryptopsy's, let's say, None So Vile, Lord Worm era, or even my other work where I was more trying to be more poetic. It's far more brutal, and that's because I'm trying to enter into the mind of the character, and in the mind of the character is their intellectual state as well, and their intellectual mental vocabulary capacity as well.
That's fascinating. And the album was written in a cabin in the forest of Quebec as well, man. So that must have been pretty freaky.
It was especially freaky because we went the 1 week where Trump shut everything down, and then COVID became like a thing, and we would go to the grocery store just about every day to restock on craft beer because we would drink it all. And people would the lines were happening and the toilet paper was disappearing, and we were like buying beer and like shrimps and then going back to the cottage. And then the next day we were like, maybe we should I don't know, buy some canned goods for our families back home in case there's nothing left. So it's extremely ominous. Yeah, but going to the cabin was something that we've always wanted to do, not during a beginning of a global pandemic, but we wanted to really focus because Cryptopsy's always been, it's not a second thing, but we would go and enter the studio after a day's work. We would go to the studio on this day and then go back a week later. We wanted to really focus and really immerse ourselves in the experience of writing the record, which is what happened for As Gommorah Burns. And then little did we know that when we'd come back home after the cabin in the woods, I wouldn't have a job to go back to. We'd have to wait a few months to do that.
I love it. And have you got any cool ghost stories from your time in the cabin? Did anything happen to really freak you
No,
out?
no, it was a brand new cabin. It wasn't scary. No, it was well, we have some funny stories there, like band members locking their keys in the car and having to call CAA, but that's probably the worst thing.
Yeah. And where are we? This is your third album as vocalist, mate. So do you think you've settled into the role a bit more, or are you a bit more comfortable with your position in the band?
Kris, I'm finally having fun, which is for the first time ever in my career with Crytopsy, and I've been with the band for 16 years. I'm literally finally only enjoying myself now. Up until now, it was a living up to the standards of the two previous vocals before me. When I first entered the band, I had literally no idea what I was doing as an extreme vocalist. I was a metalcore vocalist from a metalcore band, not deathcore as I've been called many times before. I was never a deathcore vocalist. I was never in a band that sounded like Despised Icon. I was a metalcore vocalist that was chosen for the band that had to, because I could sing clean. So I had to learn how to scream extreme vocals. It took me many, 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 many years. And now, finally, we were tracking the vocals, which were sponsored by Overhop Canada. They gave me a bunch of beer to go drink, and which is what I did while recording vocals for As Gommorah Burns. And we had so much fun, and I'm having so much fun now. And we're like jamming now for the tour that's coming up in September in the States, the Carnival of Death tour. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is like, I think like the pandemic also helped me. Like, we were touring so heavily, and then have it just be gone. Is it ever going to come back? What's going on? I think that sort of like added into my enjoyment factor too. But I'm literally starting to have fun. So the journey has just begun. 16 years into my career.
That's great to hear. So when you were talking about a new era before, that's what you meant. Like now you're actually having fun. You think you can take it other places?
I've like looped in. I think like the new era of Cryptopsy starts. I consider, this is me talking, not the band, from the Tomes onward. I feel like John coming back and doing the self-titled was almost like its own era. It was like the end of the Unspoken King era, because him coming back was like a redemption story, let's say. And then the Tomes onward is a new era because it's Christian writing for the band, where it's just him writing music. So I think that you can hear it, you can see his voice over the tomes, and then the book As Gommorah Burns at this moment.
Before I let you go, mate, we've started up doing 3 different Spotify lists with songs from people we interview. So using your own songs, can you give us one for a playlist to get the party started, one for a playlist to save your marriage, and one for a playlist to potentially end your marriage?
Okay. I got the getting a party started. Crown of Horns. It's how can you go wrong with that? It's fucking awesome. The second one was, sorry.
Save Your Marriage.
To Save Your Marriage. What's a love song for? Oh, there is one. I actually do have one. The Wretched Living is a love song. It's about old people. It's about an elderly couple that because there is such pain and suffering together, instead of like suffering through their old age together, they choose to kill themselves together. So that one will save your marriage. And then the last one was
one that could potentially end your marriage.
Praise the Filth. That ending is it's a sad, horrible moment.
Yeah, beautiful, mate. All right, well, thanks very much for your time today, Matt. It's been a pleasure. Best of luck with the album. It comes out on September 8th, mate. And like you say, I had listened to it before, and you actually do sound like you're having fun with it, bro. So congratulations and all the best.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Awesome, bro. Take care.
Cheers.